The rain hammered the chapel roof like 1,000 whispered warnings. I stood in the first pew, black dress clinging to my shoulders, surrounded by the cloying sweetness of lilies and the murmur of condolences I couldn't quite hear. Robert's casket gleamed under soft lights, polished oak, brass handles, everything tasteful and final. People filed past, touching my arm, saying his name. Then, a young man in a funeral home uniform, someone I'd never seen before, pressed a cream-colored envelope into my palm. "Mrs. Ashford," he said quietly, "this was left for you." He disappeared into the crowd before I could ask who gave it to him. My fingers trembled as I broke the seal. The handwriting was unmistakable, Robert's slanted cursive, the way he always looped his capital I, and the first line stopped my heart. "I'm still alive. Trust no one." The room tilted. I didn't faint. I've never been the fainting type. But I gripped the pew until my knuckles went white, staring at those 5 words while the minister's voice droned somewhere far away. Robert had been dead for 3 days, or so I'd been told. Heart attack in his car, parked outside the hardware store on Maple Street at 2:47 in the afternoon. The coroner had called it sudden cardiac arrest. I'd identified him myself, hadn't I? Or had I only seen him from the doorway, a sheet pulled to his chin, Victor's hand firm on my shoulder, steering me away before I could get closer. The letter continued in that familiar hand. Gracie remembered the song, the one about the red door. "Meet me where we hid the time capsule. Burn this after you read it. You'll know what to do." My breath came shallow. The red door, that was ours, a code from 40 years ago. Our first apartment. The landlord who painted everything fire engine red, and Robert joking that it meant danger. Keep out, or come in if you're brave. We de-used it exactly twice in our marriage, when something was seriously wrong, and we could unspeak freely. Once, when his business partner was skimming funds. Once, when my mother was in the hospital, and the doctor wasn't telling us everything. And now this. I folded the letter into my coat pocket as Victor approached. Robert's younger brother, square-jawed and too perfectly groomed even in grief. "Grace," he said, voice soaked in synthetic sympathy, "we need to talk about arrangements. Paperwork. The insurance company needs signatures by Monday." It was Friday. Robert had been gone 72 hours, and Victor was already counting money. I looked at him, really looked. His eyes were dry. His hands were steady. And for the first time, I wondered what he knew. "I'm not signing anything until I've had time to think," I said. Of course. He squeezed my shoulder too hard. "But the cremation is scheduled for tomorrow morning. The funeral home needs confirmation. Cremation tomorrow." I'd never agreed to that. Robert and I had plots picked out, side by side under the oak tree at Greenlawn Cemetery. We'd joked about it last summer, buying them on sale like discount furniture. "I'll call you," I told Victor, and turned away before he could argue. That night, I sat at my kitchen table under the yellow glow of the overhead light and studied the letter again. Robert's handwriting had quirks, the way he always made a tiny loop at the bottom of his YS, a habit from learning calligraphy in high school, the way he desmudged the edge of the paper with his left pinky because he never let ink dry. There, in the corner, a faint brown ring. Coffee. He'd written this at our table. Probably early morning when he'd nurse his first cup and do the crossword. This wasn't a forgery. This was him. My phone rang at 11:43 p.m. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. A voice, muffled, distant, maybe through a cheap burner phone, said 3 words. "Lock the doors." Then silence. I locked every door, every window. I checked them twice. And I realized what Robert's letter really meant. Trust no one. The next 48 hours unfolded like a thriller. I was trapped inside. I called the funeral home at 8 a.m. and halted the cremation, citing family considerations. The director sounded annoyed but compliant. Then I visited Mr. Weber, the lawyer who'd handled our will 15 years ago when we'd bought the house. He was 70 now, silver-haired and sharp as ever, working from a small office above the pharmacy on 4th Street. "Grace," he said, standing when I entered, "I'm so sorry about Robert. Thank you. But I need your help with something unusual." I showed him the letter, not the full text, just enough to prove the handwriting. If Robert were trying to protect me, legally, what would he do? Mr. Weber studied me over his reading glasses. He didn't ask if I'd lost my mind. He simply said he'd make sure you controlled the assets before anyone else could. "Do you have access to your accounts?" I did, but when I logged in that afternoon from Mr. Weber's computer, I found 3 pending requests to add Victor as a joint account holder, requests I'd never made. All filed the day after Robert died. Someone's trying to access your money, Mr. Weber said quietly. We froze the accounts, opened a new one at a different bank. I changed the locks on my house that same afternoon, hired a locksmith I found through Mara, my neighbor, 2 doors down. Mara had been a hospice nurse for 30 years. She'd brought me and tissues the day Robert died, and she didn't ask questions when I said I needed a locksmith fast and reliable. She just gave me a name and told me she'd sit on my porch while he worked. You doing okay, Grace? She asked, watching the street. I'm not sure, I said honestly, but I'm doing something. That evening, I went looking for the place Robert had mentioned, the time capsule. We'd buried it in 1987, newlyweds playing it forever, in the backyard of our first rental house on Oak Ridge Avenue. But we'd dug it up 10 years later, when the landlord sold the property. We'd laughed at our younger selves, reburied it symbolically in our current home, not in the ground, but in a hiding place only we knew. The piano bench, the old upright Yamaha in the living room, the one Robert's mother had left us. I lifted the seat cushion and felt along the hollow space beneath the music books. There, taped to the underside, another envelope. Inside, a small brass key, a slip of paper with a number 117 and a date, October 30th, 3 days from now, an address, Greyhound Station, locker level, and a single line in Robert's hand. Trust no one, except your own eyes. By Monday, Victor was relentless. He showed up at my door with Anya, a woman I barely knew, someone Robert had called a business associate in vague terms. She wore expensive perfume and carried a leather folder. Grace, darling, Anya purred. We're just trying to help. Victor tells me you've been under incredible stress. Have you considered a power of attorney arrangement? Just temporarily, so you don't have to make decisions alone. I smiled politely. I'm not alone. I have my lawyer. Victor's expression hardened. Grace, be reasonable. There's a life insurance policy worth $300,000. The company needs documentation. If you delay, it could be contested. Then let them contest it, I said, and closed the door. That night, someone called the police for a welfare check. An officer arrived, apologetic but dutiful, saying an anonymous caller had expressed concern about my mental state and ability to care for myself. I invited him in, made him tea, showed him I was coherent and calm. He left with an embarrassed shrug, but I knew who'd made that call. The next morning, my bank manager, kind woman named Mrs. Patel, phoned to tell me there'd been 2 more attempts to access my accounts using forged signatures. She'd flagged them. Mrs. Ashford, she said carefully, someone is working very hard to get to your money. I know, I said, and I'm not letting them. I sat in my kitchen that afternoon, hands wrapped around a mug of chamomile tea, and let myself feel the fear. It was real heavy and cold in my chest. But underneath it, something else burned. Determination. Robert had trusted me to be smart, to be brave, to see the truth even when it wore a familiar face. Grief is loud, I whispered to the empty room. Truth is louder. On October 30th, I drove to the Greyhound station on the edge of town. Mr. Weber had offered to come with me. I'd told him to stay by his phone. Mara had insisted on driving, and I'd let her. Some allies you don't refuse. The locker corridor smelled like metal and old concrete. Number 117 was halfway down, small and scratched. I slid the key in, and the door swung open. Inside, a USB drive in a plastic case, a manila envelope, sealed and notarized, and photographs, printouts, date-stamped, showing bank transfers, emails, and a handwritten ledger in Victor's writing. Amounts in the hundreds of thousands, names I didn't recognize, and a highlighted section, a life insurance policy on Robert, purchased 8 months ago by Victor without Robert's knowledge, with Victor listed as the beneficiary. The notarized statement was in Robert's handwriting, signed and witnessed. I, Robert James Ashford, testify that I have uncovered evidence of insurance fraud and financial misconduct orchestrated by my brother Victor Ashford and associate Anya Kellerman. I have reason to believe my life is in danger. I am documenting this and taking protective measures. Should anything happen to me, this evidence must reach the authorities. The date on the signature, 6 days before his death. My hands shook. Robert hadn't died. He'd disappeared, staged it, somehow, maybe with a body that wasn't his, maybe with the help of someone I didn't know yet. He'd done it to draw them out, to make them reveal themselves while keeping me safe. And the letter's warning made perfect sense now. The danger wasn't from strangers, it was from family. He knew, I said aloud, my voice echoing in the concrete hallway. He knew I'd read between the lines. I took everything to Mr. Weber. We made copies, 3 sets, burned them onto separate drives. He contacted an investigator he trusted, a retired FBI agent who now worked financial fraud cases. Within 2 days, we had a meeting scheduled. Victor arrived at Mr. Weber's office on Friday afternoon, expecting me to sign insurance paperwork. Instead, he found the investigator, a woman named Agent Ruiz, seated beside me. Mr. Weber slid the dossier across the table. "Victor," I said quietly, "I know what you did." His face went white, then red. "Grace, this is insane. You're not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking perfectly clearly." I kept my voice steady. "You tried to kill my husband for insurance money. You forged documents. You manipulated me while I was grieving. And now you're going to face consequences." My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered on speaker. Robert's voice, unmistakable and calm. "Gracie, I'm sorry I put you through this, but you're safe now. The charges are being filed today. I'll explain everything when I can. I love you." The line went dead. Agent Ruiz stood. "Mr. Ashford, we have several questions for you." I didn't stay for the rest. I walked out into the autumn sunlight, Mara waiting by her car, and I let myself cry, not from fear, but from relief, from exhaustion, from the strange, painful grace of knowing that love sometimes means letting someone disappear to keep you both alive. 3 weeks later, I sat at my kitchen table by candlelight, writing a letter I'd never send. Or maybe I would. Maybe someday, through lawyers and careful channels, Robert would read it. "Dear Robert, I understand now why you did what you did. I even forgive you for the fear, the uncertainty, the days I thought I was losing my mind. You gave me a gift. You trusted me to be strong enough to see the truth, to protect myself, to not break under pressure. I don't know if we'll ever share a home again. Maybe you're in witness protection now, under a new name, living a life I'll never touch. Maybe someday, when it's safe, I'll get a call. Or maybe this is our ending, not the one we planned, but the one that kept us both alive." I've learned something these past weeks. Trust is complicated. It's not about blind faith. It's about knowing who someone is, deep down, and believing in that even when everything else is chaos. You knew I'd figure it out. You knew I wouldn't crumble. And you were right. I'm okay now. The house is mine. The accounts are secure. Victor and Anya are facing charges. I'm safe. And I'm free in a way I didn't expect. Free to rebuild, to choose, to trust myself above all. If I never see you again, know this. I loved you. I still do, and I always will. But I love myself more now. And that's your final gift to me. Yours, Gracie. I folded the letter, sealed it, and placed it in the piano bench where the time capsule had been. The truth had set me free. Not just from Victor's schemes, but from the illusion that safety comes from holding on. Sometimes, the people we love protect us by letting go. And sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is trust ourselves when the world says we're wrong. Trust no one, Robert had written, but I'd learned to add one exception: trust yourself, always. Thank you for letting me share my story with you. I know it's not the kind of ending we expect, no reunion, no perfect closure, but life doesn't always give us fairy tales. Sometimes it gives us something better. The strength to stand alone, and the wisdom to know that that's enough. If you've ever faced a moment when you had to choose between what everyone expected and what your gut told you was true, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. What would you have done in my shoes? Would you have trusted the letter, or dismissed it as grief playing tricks? Please subscribe to Letters of Grace if this story moved you. There's power in sharing our truths, even the messy, complicated ones. And remember, the people who truly love us want us to be strong, not dependent. They want us to survive, even if that means surviving without them. Thank you for listening.